Hi everyone, another journey. Our journey is affectionately known as the networking queen. They have a passion for connecting with and encouraging others. With a background in marketing, leadership, and community service, our guest has owned a marketing company, led networking groups, served as executive director of a chamber of commerce, taught leadership classes, and been active in ministries and non-profit organizations. Drawn from a personal journey marked by abuse, self-doubt, and toxic relationships, our guest now uses her experiences to inspire others. So, as a certified life coach and speaker, our guest has helped individuals overcome barriers and rediscover their worth. We will talk about her book, because she is also the author of a book, which is a heartfelt memoir chronicling a path from despair to healing through faith and self-discovery. I say no more because it's her journey, but I welcome Amy to the journey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You're welcome. Now, I touched upon certain elements in there that we will talk about, and obviously including your, personal journey about being abused, being self-doubted a lot, and being in toxic relationships. But we won't touch upon that yet. But
Okay.
but your earliest memories that kick-started your journey. Can you tell us what was your earliest memory?
Sure. I do have some good memories. I grew up for the first several years of my life in my grandmother's house. My mom was the oldest girl of six girls, and there were two boys as well. So my aunts were all teenagers when I was living in that house and really in my early years. And I remember a lot of just hanging out with them and being in the kitchen and my grandmother making fried bread. So there were some great memories. One of my aunts loved to dance, and she had a lot of music boxes and a little Hawaiian girl that I could wind up and she danced while the music played. So those were some great memories.
Yeah, and you touch upon music boxes. When you're younger and you do have those sort of music boxes, you wind it up as tight as you can.
Hmm.
And like you said, you open it and it's just like, in this case, and it is most cases, a lady just blooms out of it when you open it and the
Yes.
music comes out and she's dancing to it. It's just magical.
Yes. Yes. I love those.
So obviously, as you got older and you became a teenager and obviously young adult, was this the point where you found things changing, or did you feel you had the security still of being in the family, or did you feel like things were changing?
Well, when I was about 5 years old, my mother met the man who would become my stepfather, and he was my primary abuser. So that the good memories ended very quickly, were replaced with just a life of hardship. I In my book, I talk about just knowing, having this feeling from the first moment that I met him, that there was just a darkness about him, and I didn't want to be around him. My mother would end up marrying him. She did not, as adults, we often look past the red flags and don't see the things sometimes that children see or other people see. And so the relationship with him started when I was 5 years old, and he quickly became very abusive. And in my book, it's titled The Three Fathers. And I had a question the other day about what shaped me with those three relationships, and the reason that I named the book The Three Fathers. And The Three Fathers depicts three important elements: the bio father who left before I was born. So I dealt with abandonment issues when I was a teenager. I did try to meet him. Well, I did meet him and was rejected again. The stepfather who came into my life when I was 5 years old and became abusive in every way, shape, and form. He was sexually, verbally, physically, mentally abusive for the duration of time that he lived in our home. And then the third father is what I call the godfather. I had to stick with the bio father, the stepfather, and the godfather. So that was my first impression of who God was. And it wasn't a good impression, because that was a picture of God who is a perfect person, and he shook his head in disappointment at me. So the rejection, the abuse, and again, just never being good enough really kind of formulated the view I had of myself, of life, and the overall arching picture was just that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough to be part of my biological father's family. I wasn't good enough to be treated well by my stepfather, and I wasn't good enough for God to give a second look. And that was the impression that I had of God. It was a wrong impression, but that shaped how I felt about myself and just really having a lot of self-worth issues and self-doubt issues. And because I didn't believe that I was worthy of being treated better, I accepted a lot of poor treatment from a lot of people in my life through my teenage years and well into my adulthood. Just didn't require people to treat me the way I deserved to be treated because I didn't think I deserved to be treated better.
Yeah, and that is often a difficult thing when you are in that lowest point. You are always questioning, and am I worth enough? Am
Mhm.
I good enough? Am I doing things right? You're always questioning yourself constantly in the negative to say, am I this? Am I that? It's like, yes, you are still you, but because of the impact of what's happened, and in your case, and I know in the majority I know I've spoken to, including myself, you always do question, am I good enough? I deserve this. You know, it's always, you always think the negative is the purpose, the way forward. And there's no way beyond that point of being negative because your mind's so ingrained with, yes, I am worthy because I deserve that, you know, and no people, men or women or even children, deserve to be abused in such a tragic way. And sexual abuse, whatever age you are, is a very powerful subject. And yes, you try and tell someone who you think you can trust, but then it feels abandoned because they don't want to hear it because they like, no, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I assume when you did try and talk about it, people didn't want to listen to you.
I actually never disclosed that to anyone. I was very ashamed. There's a lot of shame that comes with sexual abuse because for me, it made me feel dirty. It made me feel like I was doing something wrong. And I write about that in my book because there were other men along the way who took advantage, and it just makes you feel like, especially when you are young, that there must be something wrong with me, that these men, these older men would be attracted to me. What's wrong with me? What am I doing? So in my case, I did not say anything to anybody because there was so much shame associated with it. I didn't want anybody to know that about me. So the reason that it came out was because my stepfather tried to kill himself when my mom left him. And he disclosed in his psych evaluation that he had done to me. And so my mother came to me and asked me if there were things that he had done to me, if he had touched me inappropriately. And I was mortified when she asked me. I never wanted her to know that about me. I was ashamed of it. So I'm glad that, looking back, hindsight's always 2020, right? I'm glad looking back that he ended up disclosing that because I don't know when I would have ever been able to talk about that. I'm sure it would have been well into my adult years. And I wouldn't have gotten help early on. And I still needed help later on, but I wouldn't have gotten help early on and start to deal with the fact that that was his perversion. It was not had nothing to do with me. It was not my fault. I had nothing to feel shame for, and he was responsible as an adult for his actions, and it was wrong for him to treat me the way that he did, to do the things that he did. So I'm grateful in hindsight that that was disclosed early on so that I could start getting some help that I needed.
Yeah, and so talking about, excuse me, talking about things in the where it is now in today's world. Do you feel like it has helped you being able to talk about it? Because obviously, when you are that younger, it was difficult because you didn't want to be shown as ashamed of what happened. But do you feel like it's got easier for you?
You know, as I worked through issues, and this is one thing that I will say about therapy or coaching or whatever you choose to engage in, if you have abuse in your past, if you've had toxic relationships, if you've witnessed abuse and not been brought up in a healthy environment, the one thing that I learned and really worked to pass on to people is that it affects you differently in different phases of your life. So when I was in therapy at a young age, 11, 12, 13 years old, I was dealing with things that was appropriate for that age and for the fact that it had just come out and working through those things. But I should have been in therapy again as I started to have relationships, as I worked through my teenage years, as I started to have adult relationships. I should have been in therapy for each phase of that because the abuse impacts you differently as you grow and as you start to experience new and different things. I clearly wouldn't have known what to expect at 12 and 13 years old about how I would respond to or be active in relationships. I encourage everybody to, I felt like if I hadn't been fixed when I was in therapy, there was no fixing me. And that's not true. You just need to deal with things in the age appropriate times when you find yourself affected differently. So I ended up in a well, throughout my teenage and young adult life, I ended up in very unhealthy relationships. I ended up in a very unhealthy marriage. And really, yes, it's gotten easier. And not only that, having been through a healing process and truly knowing who I am and what my value is, I no longer tolerate people who do not treat me well or don't show me respect. I know what I'm worth. I know what I'm worth being treated well, and I don't accept less. Whereas I did, even through my marriage, I felt like if I was being treated poorly, I must have done something to deserve that I didn't deserve being treated better. And it wasn't until after I left my marriage and really started working towards what is my value, because my entire life I let other people determine what I was worth. I let other people determine my value. And sometimes it was things that they would directly say that I took and internalized. And a lot of times it was, well, if I was worth more, then he would try harder. If I was worth more, then he would treat me better. I must only be worth being treated this way.
Yeah.
And I had to find a space where I knew my value and I stopped letting the world determine that for me.
And when you're older, you in a situation, if you're in that sort of situation where it becomes a narcissistic relationship, and being in a narcissistic relationship, it's always difficult because it's like when you're a child again. If you're a child and you go through certain abuses, not everyone's going to be open and say, I'm in a narcissistic relationship.
Right.
And, and it's good when you can be open about it, and it's good when you can escape from it. But at the same time, who's going to listen to you and support you if you don't say anything? Yes, but there may be indications that people can reach out and say, "Are you okay?"
Hmm.
But at the same time, how open are you going to be to saying "I'm okay" when you're in that situation? Because you can't openly admit it in front of your spouse to say "I'm okay" because they're watching everything you do.
Right. And you work hard to make yourself okay, and you don't know what being okay really means. So I have taken my journey and now really just want to help other people because it took me so long throughout my life to get to the point where I felt healed and whole again, and I know my value, and I want to help people, whether they're in the space that I am now in their adult life, or if they're younger, I want to help people deal with those things now and truly know what their value is. And for me, it became a very spiritual journey because if we're honest, we can't put our value in anybody else. And we can't expect that from anybody else because people don't always have good days. They have bad days and they're not always going to be there to validate and affirm you. And we're not even that way with ourselves. Look at our self talk sometimes. Our self talk is not all that great. We can't be our own hype person all the time because we're very emotional beings and we're dependent on circumstances sometimes, is how we feel in the moment. And it's not wrong to have feelings. We've got to process through those feelings. So for me, I had a very good friend tell me through my separation and then into my divorce. He said, "You're never going to work through this until you untangle your identity." And I really grasped onto the word identity. And I'm like, well, where do I get that then? Because I thought that there was all of these people, and especially the relationships that I was in with men, that eventually I would have figured out my identity or somebody would have made me worthy or worthwhile. And I was looking in the wrong places. We can't depend on other people to validate us all of the time or to really bring out our own value and worth. So for me, the only place that I could find that was an somebody who would never change his mind about what I was worth and what I meant to him was in the Bible. God never changes his mind about you.
Mhm.
And so I really went on a deep dive into the word and found all of the scriptures that talk about what I'm worth to God, who he says I am, because that never changes. And once I started to base the foundation of who I was and what I was worth on that word, then it never wavered again.
Yeah, and that's just powerful because obviously that's the enlightenment that so many people, when they do find God, it's a way of actually feeling the love, the warmth, the light. Is always powerful when you do first encounter, God, because it's that impact that He has on you, and it hits you, He hits you, and it's a very powerful, intense, strong, whatever you want to describe it. I'm trying to think of alliteration that will go with it, but it's just enlightening in so many ways, and that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And he increases your power. Like he says he's all of these things. He is courage, he is hope, he is love, I felt healed. Once I started working through this, I just felt completely healed and knowing that I was worth everything to God. And so obviously the story changes my view of the Godfather once I discovered who he really was and how much he loves me, what I'm worth to him, and what he wants for me. It changed. And he became my savior instead of another figure that had impacted me negatively in my youth. But I
Mm.
didn't have a true visual or idea of who he was. It was a wrong thought about who God was. And so that was revolutionary when I really heard who God was. And it was very much, I went to church with a friend, reluctantly, but I went to church with a friend. And the story was on the prodigal son that day. And it would be easy to think that I saw myself as the prodigal or connected with the prodigal, but really what hit me hard and had me in tears was the vision of the father of the prodigal son when the prodigal son returned and he's thinking to himself, he's trying to get ready for what he's going to say to his father and just please take me in and let me be one of your servants because his father's servants never wanted for anything. He just wanted to have shelter and food on a regular basis again. And so he was preparing his apology, his plea for his father just to make him a servant. And he thought and stressed about this all the way home, which I can relate to because we think and stress about a lot when we're
Mm.
going to come up against a difficult situation that we're preparing for. But none of that happened. He didn't have to plead for that. Not only did his father embrace him and take him in, when his father saw him coming down the road, he ran to him. And when we talk about that being the the vision of God, when we come to him, he runs to us. He doesn't wait for us to try and plead our case or beg him to take us back. When we start coming back or when we turn to him, he runs to us. And that's that visual and that story just had me in tears for the rest of that service.
I can imagine that. So, going into your book and obviously any websites or any way of keeping in contact with you, people be wanting to know how can they get in contact with you? Is there any way they can follow your journey?
Absolutely. So I did put up a website. It's amyfreeman.info. And I'm on Facebook. My business is In the Light. So I do, of course, I'm an author now, and I do coaching and speaking engagements because I really feel like God wants me to take this journey that I have been through and the healing that I've experienced and help others discover their value and work through some of the things, whether it's abuse, toxic relationships, just their own sense of self-worth, if they're stuck with children or what have you. I just feel pulled, very called to help others in the overcoming. And then even finding joy and peace in the midst of trials because trials don't stop. So I do coaching, speaking, workshops. I love to do small women's groups and would love the opportunity to talk with anybody on Facebook. It is In the Light with Amy Freeman-Gasperetti. And I also, let's say I'm on Instagram, but my book is available on Amazon and it is The Three Fathers from Hopeless to Healing.
Okay. Now, the last ultimate question. What would you say to people to help on their journey progressing forward?
I would tell you that you are so incredibly loved. I would tell them that God created you in his word, and these are some of the verses that I clung to when I was in my search. It says that he knew you before you were born. He knit you together in your mother's womb. And he has great purpose for you. Several times in the Bible, it talks about doing the things that God called you to do long ago. And that implies that you have purpose, that he knew who you were going to be. He knew what I was going to go through. He knew that through him, with him, that I would have the strength to overcome, to find myself healed and in a place that I have hope now. I named the book The Three Fathers from Hopeless to Healing because there were times that I felt there was zero hope. I even tried to take my life at one point because I just never thought that anything was going to get better and my life was just a bad draw. And through his word, I learned that he created me. He knew way before my mother ever got pregnant with me who I was going to be and the plans that he had for me and the impact that I would have. So I would say, don't lose hope. You are wonderfully and fearfully made. And if you don't feel it, it doesn't make it the truth. Our feelings don't make it the truth. So the truth is in God's word. The truth is that you are valuable, that you are worth God laying down his own life for here on earth. You are worth the torture. You are worth the betrayal. You are worth everything that Jesus went through. You. And one of the things that really impacted me in talking to a pastor was he told me if you are the only person that Jesus could have saved that day when he went to the cross, he still would have gone through everything that he did for your salvation. And another pastor talked about in one of his sermons the value of things. And not that you are a thing, you are a person. But when we talk about real estate, what is the value of a home? Well, the bottom line is the value is what somebody will pay for it. So your value is what somebody will pay for it. And Jesus paid for that with his life. He paid for you with his life. That is your value. You were worth that. And if you don't feel it, if there are things that are just holding you back, then counseling, coaching, find somebody who, especially if you are a believer or really feel like faith is a piece of the healing, which I know that it is, then find somebody to walk with you through that, to help you believe until you believe without a doubt for yourself, because that is my calling. There are other people out there who want that too, who do what they do because they just truly believe and have a passion for helping people. And I don't want anybody to be where I was. And if you are, I don't want you to be there longer than you have to be there, because there's so much more on the other side. And the impact that I can have after allowing God to heal me and reveal to me my true value and the insight and wisdom that he has given me in order to help other people and encourage other people working through those things so that they come out better on the other side like I did. That is my life's purpose. That is my passion.
I love that. And I like to say thank you for sharing your journey with us today, Amy. It's been enlightening, it's been insightful. I'm going to call the podcast after your book because it's one way promoting your book as well. But I believe, you know, everyone has a journey. Yours certainly has been the journey that people should attain to. If, you feel alone, never feel alone, because even if you think it, you said it himself, God is there and he's always going to be there. He will never give up being there for you, no matter what.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your journey today.
Thank you for having
And
me.
now, a message from Amy. Amy, it's over to you.
Hello, I am Amy Harrison. I'm the author of the book Feline Warrior Part 1 and Part 2, a fictional story that is written in a poetic format that is based on real-life events that could happen to anyone and intended only for relatable purposes. This story claws into Catgirl's past abuse. Catgirl is human and part feline, but truly a warrior who can handle anything because she is strong and fierce. She has been taken advantage of for far too long. Join her on her journey as she reaches freedom. Here are some poems from Feline Warrior. Tears flow. I no longer know what to do. I am no longer who I once was, and it is because I made a choice to use my voice, and that is okay, because what I had to say was true, unlike me and you. Now I see. I am free. I am me. I am Catgirl. Ultimately, be you. Always stay true. Do what you want to do, because every day is made new. If you want to read more, visit the link in the description. Meow at you later. The Journey Podcast explores stories of personal growth, challenges, and life-changing moments. Each episode dives into unique experiences, offering insights and inspiration for listeners navigating their own paths. I believe everyone has a story worth sharing. If you'd like to share your journey with David and others, email your story to wisewords1983@reborn.com, and it may be featured in a future episode.